I'll just start by saying that while I'm here, my thoughts are with the people of Israel who are struggling tremendously now. Hundreds of people are impacted, and they're in my mind constantly. Just felt compelled to say it. But we're here now, and it is good to be here and good to see everyone here. I have with me Deniz Ertan, a senior director at eBay, and Frank Badalamenti, a partner at PwC. And we're here to talk about AI. So, yes, Scott mentioned AI earlier, and we all hear a lot of things that are happening in AI and generative AI. And it is very exciting. We want to talk today about maybe the day-to-day applications of how fraud teams can actually use AI, can actually protect themselves from bad usage of AI. And with that, Frank, maybe you can help us set the stage a little bit.
Yeah, so just to quickly introduce myself, everyone, Frank Badalamenti, I'm a partner at PwC. I focus on financial crimes consulting as well as data risk and privacy. So I focus on helping clients across all industries better prevent, detect, and respond to fraud, and with a heavy analytics and technology focus. So sort of set the stage today, as many of you are well aware, like the use of traditional AI techniques, supervised and unsupervised models, unstructured data has been very prevalent for several years, if not decades, if you think about sort of what FICO Falcon does and that sort of thing. But ever since this past fall, the world has been abuzz with this sort of new development around generative AI, right? Which basically is a variation of a deep learning model that allows the model to ingest and interpret and understand large volumes of unstructured data, typically text, but it could be other forms of unstructured data as well, and then be able to almost magically synthesize it, better interpret it, predict things from it, and also produce novel new content that is based on the data that it's trained on. And it has really like democratized the use of AI for end consumers and end users. So, you don't need to be a highly trained data scientist to spin up, let's say, OpenAI's ChatGPT and start asking questions and start coming up with creative or innovative prompts to get the large language model to produce some output that you're looking for, whether it's getting an understanding of like a true topic, something that you're trying to diagnose, or whether it's to create, let's say, fictional content, a book or something like that, or some sort of story, right? So highly flexible, but with that opportunity comes lots of risks. One other interesting to note about generative AI models is the adoption rate was unprecedented, right? So it took 5 days for OpenAI's ChatGPT to acquire its first 1 million users. And in comparison, Instagram took 2.5 months to acquire its first 1 million users, and then other major applications like Facebook and Netflix took many, many months beyond that. So, the interest and the uptake rate is huge. We do believe there are applications in both the prevention and detection of fraud as well as in the perpetration of fraud. So that's what we're going to explore a little bit today and get into some topics to dig into that. So happy to be here, and maybe we can get into it.
Thanks for that, Frank. So yes, we have the definition here of what generative AI is, and I think we've all probably played with it and have AI write poems for us of all sorts of topics or whatever. We do have some comments here. Again, this slide is from Frank, PwC. I do want to make a note that while we all work for different organizations, and we all know that we are representing our own opinions, predictions, thought-provoking imagination of what AI can be or do. We all have experiences with using AI or seeing AI, but then again, we are representing ourselves here. Frank, do you want to walk us through what we're seeing here?
Yeah, just very quick. We thought this would be a good slide kind of to help frame things a little bit as we get further into the discussion. So this is from a survey PwC conducted this year, a trust survey on 500 business executives and risk executives as well. And what this survey shows us is that 100% of the business leaders that we surveyed say their company is prioritizing some initiative related to AI systems in the near term, with generative AI being a key component of that. But you will see a lower percentage of those executives say that they plan on being highly focused on improving the governance of those systems, or involving in the having risk professionals involved in the planning and strategy stage, right? Which means that there's a huge interest in deploying those models, and maybe not as much concerted focus on managing the risks of those models, which we believe is critical. So part of what we'll be talking about today is like, what are some of those risks that are out there, and how can they be mitigated?
Thanks, Frank. So as a preparation for today, I was kind of looking to see what's new in AI news. And honestly, you can't really, there wasn't enough space on the slide to even show all of the big titles that we're seeing in the past months. I think this is from just a few weeks ago, just one day worth of news, how almost all of the big companies are heavily leaning into AI, if it's investments, if it's development of new tools. ChatGPT released a bunch of new capabilities, which I'm amazed playing with it and see how it can now work with pictures or voices or sounds, and it can do a whole lot of different cool things. And obviously, as a fraud prevention enthusiast, it makes you think what fraudsters can do with it. And even more so, because we did want to make sure that this session here is very much the actuality of how we're dealing with it. How can fraud fighters use AI and leverage AI to be better equipped to fight those threats? And lucky for us, we have Deniz here, who can share how are fraudsters and fraud fighters using AI.
Happy to share. So quick introduction. So I lead the buyer risk team at eBay. So this is the entire buyer journey, from account creation to transaction risk, where we deal with account takeovers, stolen financials, and we call it friendly fraud, but first-party fraud, as well as chargeback, just the end state. So the dispute management system, this is the entire buyer risk journey. So coming to fraudsters and how it's changing the dynamics, right? So I think like every technology, so people can and will use it as a tool or weapon. So now we have this mainstream ChatGPT, right? So it's kind of intended to be used by good people, right, in good use. But immediately after ChatGPT came out, so there is the weapon came out, FraudGPT. I don't know if you heard about it. And it's kind of a tool that enables kind of fraudster to commit fraud easily. And I saw some price tags starting from very simple $100 to $2,000. These are packaged products, and you can just purchase and just defraud people. How they do it? So there's lots of public data out there, our social media profiles, and lots of public information, and it's amazing and crazy how much data is out there. So now these tools are utilizing those data, and they will be creating fake accounts. They will be creating emails, and even can mimic your voice, which is the scariest thing, right? So they can call your parents and pretending that they are under stress, and you can just give anything, right? These are your loved ones, so there's nothing else you can do, right? You can just definitely give them whatever they want, especially if it's so convincing. I believe it will take this fraud management to a different level and sophistication. Not that they will be sophisticated, but I think it will be used by masses. So amateur fraudsters now will have access to these tools that they didn't have before. I think it will make things kind of a little different. And I believe Gen AI is lowering the barrier to entry for committing fraud and making it very efficiently for them. So I think that's one thing that we need to be very careful about. But on the other side, flip side, right? So AI is not new, right? It has been around for long years. And by the way, I was building neural network models in 2004. So I think 20 years ago, AI has been around. So it wasn't known as Gen AI. It's, again, making it very publicly available for all of us. But what we do as organizations, right? So we are, of course, getting more sophisticated and more every day. So we have, the slide maybe, we are kind of, I know this looks like maybe brain, but this is how we are actually looking at the activities on our site. So this may look crazy, but this is kind of how we are detecting the behavior of our customers on our site. So, and as kind of Frank mentioned, right, so there are you can just give a flag or bad definition to a model, and you can train the model and just kind of can build a model. This is called supervised machine learning. But also there's an unsupervised version of it where you don't give anything and you just feed data into it and you let machine decide what is normal, what is abnormal. And if you look at the red areas, which you can see big clusters, so these are the fraudsters actually staying on our website or just platform, trying to do account takeover. So you can see there are different behaviors. What we are looking at we are looking at how they are interacting in our platform. So how many pages they are going, how fast they are going in between pages, and the page sequence, and right, which sequence they are going in order. So I think there are lots of behavioral information that we collect that we can now determine and identify fraud. So again, fraudsters are getting more sophisticated and maybe faster, but we are evolving as well. Ultimately, we need to either stay one step ahead of them or one step behind, not too far behind them, because technology is evolving and we need to catch up.
I think it's really interesting what you're saying, and the one thing you did mention was important. I think, yes, AI exists for a long time. There are things that all sorts of apparatuses from the 17th century that you can basically call AI because they do stuff on their own. But what we are seeing since the last fall, as Frank mentioned, is the fact that it's been fully democratized. And now everyone can use it. And I'm also imagining a world where in the future, now this is obviously a great representation of a model that spit out results on clustering impact of fraudsters versus good users, but potentially in the future, you might have a tool that you can use it like a ChatGPT, a tool, please detect all the fraud activity and do whatever you need to do to get to it. So definitely those leaps, I think, are very near. And if we're zooming out a little bit, so you definitely represent like when a fraud fighting organization, Frank, PwC, and you have a lot of connections, you see a lot of different things out there, like more industry broad. What are the types of things that you're seeing on both ends of that question?
Yeah. And Deniz did mention some of this, but just to give a couple more examples, right? And I'll kind of characterize two main kinds of threats, right? So one is, how are fraudsters using generative AI and things like deep fakes, against the retailers, the online retailers, and the banks themselves directly. And so one thing, they have been known to do is, you can use these large language models to continually refine and perfect like a script that you would use when on the phone with customer service or an online version of customer service to come up with like the perfectly crafted set of words you can use to, make a first-party fraud claim, let's say, right? Or gain access to an account or what have you, because like the model will continually refine itself and increase your probability of success. And so, they will use that to do a better job at socially engineering the call center than they can do themselves.
And I assume at scale as well, because occasionally people try and have a chat with them.
And be able to do that across many, many different customers that they're maybe, let's say, attempting to impersonate, right? But I would say, large retailers and banks have the ability to defend themselves against some of that, right? So you can deploy things like device intelligence, behavioral biometric, pattern, recognition, things like that, geolocation data, right? Session data, things like that, to kind of attempt to determine whether the person that is interacting with the contact center is or isn't the true customer. Where I think there will be much more pronounced risk is when fraudsters are using generative AI against the customers of a retailer or a bank, right? To phish them more easily. Many of you have gotten phishing emails or phishing texts, and you can spot them from a mile away because it's like riddled with spelling errors, grammar errors, the formatting is terrible, and you're like, oh, this is obviously a phishing email, right? But think about a large language model sort of being able to perfect and correct the spelling and the grammar and the formatting issues and really make it look completely indistinguishable from an actual email you would get from the fraud department or from a customer service department at a retailer. And even put up things like spoof websites that look exactly like the real thing. So I believe that is the end consumer that is going to be compromised at a much, much higher rate and scammed for that matter because they won't have the same defenses that a large corporation would have to roll out like adaptive behavioral biometrics and like device intelligence, right? And so now the retailers will need to be prepared for this because it's your customers that are going to willingly give up their credentials and their sensitive information to fraudsters that will then now have that access, right? So those are just a few thoughts there. I think it will be a bit of an arms race, right, as the fraudsters get more sophisticated in their use of generative AI. Businesses will have to come up with ways to detect that generative AI is being used. I've already seen a few models or organizations that are attempting to spin up models that can detect whether a piece of text or something that is spoken was generated using, let's say, ChatGPT versus by an authentic human being. Same thing on like photographs and audio clips and video clips, like basically like deep fake detectors. And so that will be advancing kind of at a similar rate as the fraudsters getting creative and ingenuous with their use of the technology.
Well, I think we all know that next year we're not going to be here. It's going to be deepfakes, probably, talking to the people. So with everything you said in mind, I think what was very important for me today to not really be, because there's a lot of different talks about AI and we're all seeing everything and it's very, it makes your mind go wild, right? It's very creative, the things you can do. But I really wanted to keep this very much down to like what actually we should do, how we should treat AI. I know in Forder, for example, we have a very strict policy on when it's okay to leverage generative AI in our day-to-day lives. If we need help with a snippet of code or we need to write an email, we can do those things, but it's very important not to expose specific PIIs or specific variable names of our code or what have you. We also all read recently of those, like there's a big lawsuit of I think 17 world-renowned authors who are suing OpenAI for using their content, not to mention the writers and SAG strikes in Hollywood that we just saw. This is definitely kind of a hot topic on how we can leverage AI, but still make sure that we're not doing anything that's against regulation, that does not infiltrate someone's privacy. Is there anything, Deniz, that you're doing specifically to combat these things?
Yeah, we are definitely doing. So I think AI has been evolving and Gen AI in the last 18 months. And we have been really focusing on at eBay. So I think we created a responsible AI team, first of all, to make sure that we don't use AI in we are using AI in a transparent way. There are no biases or there are no consequences against our customers. So I think AI, the responsible AI is not nice to have at eBay, but it's a must-have, and it's a requirement right now. And I think that's definitely the right thing to do. But also our chief privacy officer recently shared that they are partnering with legislators and regulators to really just kind of put some defenses around usage of AI. So definitely, I think we all need to come together and just discuss about kind of what are the guardrails that we need to put around using AI, because it can get really out of control easily. And there can be some unexpected consequences for our customers. We need to be very careful. And on the regulation side, so what they are doing actually is, even though there's no law that passed right now, so they are trying to just see what are the kind of right ways to use AI. And actually, European Union AI Act is the most advanced one right now. That's not a law still, but they think that it will take at least 1 or 2 years to pass as a law. So that means what they are doing right now is they are trying to coming together. So it's not that it's a requirement, but they are doing because, one, it's the right thing to do for our customers. 2, by the time that those laws comes in and just pass, so we want to be ready. As a result,
actually also impacting those, because regulators are always like 10 steps behind.
Actually, what we are doing is we are kind of helping them to learn and expedite the learning process so that we can just really come up with the right guardrails. And with the European AI Act, actually, what they are trying to do is they are trying to get the GDPR foundational kind of transparency and everything, those principles, and applying it to the responsible AI. So I think we all need to come together and just set those guardrails to protect our businesses and customers.
That's right. I'm also thinking about other risks of like we all learn of like hallucinations of AI, that you ask a question and you're getting a different answer than reality. As a kind of famous story in Israel now, one of the town halls used a content marketer who just leveraged AI to write about the city. And turns out this city has a big aquarium and a nice beach, and like, it has none of it, but they just asked AI to write like a story about the city. So it's definitely, I mean, obviously it wasn't harmful because it was just funny, but when you're leveraging it to fight fraud, you want to make sure that you're not gonna
Exactly.
get from it. Frank, anything that you're seeing on regulation risks?
Couple thoughts here just to add on to what Deniz said. So, obviously things like hallucinations are even a further reason for having robust model governance and model risk management around the use of these models. At PwC, we've developed some accelerators, some tools to help accelerate the process of documenting and testing and validating models like these, using kind of like a guided workflow kind of approach so that it's done consistently. And so some of what causes the hallucinations is poor data quality of the data that the LLM is being trained on, right? So if you look at the public version of ChatGPT, it's trained on this massive volume of data, from the internet and other sources that contains like truthful information. It also contains untruthful information or fiction or speculation or things like that. And so when you're trying to glean answers out of it when prompting it, it can give you inaccurate inferences or information. So what we've sort of identified as a key need for major corporations is maybe to not use the public version of ChatGPT, but rather spin up a proprietary internal-facing version of that model that is pointing at and trained at a company's own proprietary data assets that have been curated, validated, tested for completeness, vetted, and then that way, when you're asking questions of that model, you can expect to get higher fidelity or more truthful and accurate things coming out of it. But there have been instances, like publicly known instances, where major global corporations sort of accidentally or without realizing the consequences of it, uploaded like proprietary source code and intellectual property into the public version of ChatGPT, and there's like really no way to take that back. So they've now like sort of given that information out to the world to mine.
So while we have you on that, maybe, and I think that leads kind of great segue to our next question. So what can organization do in terms of like when you're thinking about structuring your organization, what type of resourcing you need, how you're going to build a team that handle those things? What are the type of things that you think organizations should take into account? And then I want to hear what you think about it, Deniz.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing to note is professionals that are well-versed in generative AI models aren't sort of like in huge supply right now, right? So there likely will be a bit of a talent war or a need for upskilling, taking like existing data analysts, data scientists, risk professionals, and upskilling them to be more knowledgeable about, generative AI models in general. And then you will need, data scientists, you'll need prompt engineers, you'll need risk management professionals, model governance people that are familiar with the process of validating traditional AI models, which people have had to do, for ages. There's regulatory requirements around that. And then sort of retool those people to do the same thing for generative AI models. And, you can't underestimate the importance of having a sufficient number of people to perform those model risk governance functions, because you may want to validate several models in parallel, and you can't really afford to wait 6-7 months before you can put something in production because you have a backlog on the validation side.
So zooming in then is to what you're actually doing, if you can share, or how you're thinking about structuring your team with that in mind.
Yeah, definitely. I think at eBay, what we are saying is we are seeing AI as a kind of augmenting the human capabilities, not to replace them. So that's why on all the AI work, there's always a human touch to it. So we are not letting the kind of machine decide, and we are always looking at it from the human perspective. But we believe that, I think that comes with the upskilling the teams, as Frank mentioned, right? So we are just making sure that our teams are up to speed with all the new enhancements, and they are knowledgeable to maximize the use of AI while really the kind of automating the more repetitive work so that we would leave the remaining time that they are spending on more repetitive time. I believe this will unlock the human intelligence further, because now I think according to McKinsey Global Institute recent report, they are saying that 30% of the work done today can be automated by AI, using AI by 30%. So by 2030. And think about it, 30% of the things that humans are kind of trying to tackle today that will be freed up powered by AI. But the remaining time, I think our brain is not utilized fully, right? So I think that will unlock additional kind of opportunities and maybe unlock some further human intelligence. And we will be focusing on our team members, we'll be focusing on more creative work than more routine and just boring work. So I see it as a kind of big potential there.
Yeah, thanks. I think what I'm hearing, and that's definitely every time we talk about AI with anyone, is like everyone is kind of afraid of predictions, because even a year back, who knew that anything the likes of, we're talking about ChatGPT, but there are many different tools. We're talking about picture generation. Again, I've heard Beatles songs that they didn't wrote or never sang or recorded, but it sounds like it's theirs. So there's so many things that you can't really think of, and definitely trying to stay ahead of the curve is the challenge. In terms of kind of the fraud, specifically transaction fraud, or any like an engagement of a user with the system, we've gathered some thoughts here. We had a team of thought leaderships in Forder, kind of sitting and thinking on what the future might look like. And I think the biggest item, and it's kind of what Scott mentioned earlier, but you're not going to order groceries. You're going to open the fridge, and the fridge is going to see that you're missing milk and just going to buy it for you. So in a sense, we're going to delegate our identity and credentials to a machine or a bot that does everything for us, sometimes even before we think about it. So there's definitely kind of another, I don't want to say man in the middle because it's not a man, but there's something in the middle between the actual consumer and retailer or whatever organization that might be, that if it's a bank or anything we're interacting with. And the identity and security are going to be different. It's going to be dynamic, and it's going to be, again, the delegated authentication of your identity to something else, which we're already seeing today. I think probably a lot of us have today, like a button on the washing machine that whenever you run out of detergent, you just click on it and it orders it from Amazon. So there's a lot of different things where the future is unknown. And we need to kind of adapt to it strategically and make sure that we're there doing those things, think about those things, resourcing our teams accordingly. And the people who will do that successfully definitely will be the winners. In 2030, where 30% of the job is delegated to bots and AI and whatnot, we're going to still be there. We have just really few more seconds or in a minute. Deniz, what are the key takeaways that you think is important to have stay with the audience here?
So I think one I just kind of shared, right? So I think seeing AI as in kind of how we can augment the human capabilities rather than kind of replacing them. I think that should be one key thing in mind. We will need human, but there are things that AI can do better. On the other side, to combat the generative AI-driven fraud, I think that organizations need to really focus on using advanced analytics, behavioral biometrics or behavioral data, as well as kind of machine learning, while really staying close to the peers in that industry and sharing and experiences and insights and being close to the regulators. I think it all come together and just tackle this properly in a responsible way. I think these are kind of my key takeaways.
Awesome. Frank, any comments?
Yeah, just my parting thoughts here is that I do believe this technology will continue to accelerate and innovate and improve at a fairly rapid pace and get better. And so, bad actors are going to be doing the same. So I think it's important for everyone here to be abreast of this topic and familiar with it. And in my experience, the best way to learn about this technology is actually by doing, so like I encourage everyone to if you haven't already, register for OpenAI's ChatGPT or Llama or Bard, like all the big tech firms have some version of an LLM, and just experiment with it, experiment with different prompts, get familiar with what it can do, what it can't do, how it might be used by a bad actor. And also experiment with some of the ones that are beyond text. So like the image generators, the audio generators, there's audio, video, There's an interesting one that can like translate a video of you speaking one language into you speaking in a different language and change your lip movement. So there's a lot of really cool stuff out there, and I think you'll just become more comfortable understanding it by actually trying it out.
Thank you. It was exceptionally insightful. I'm sorry we ran out of time because I can probably talk about it for long. Thank you, Deniz. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.